So I see Kathy's back on screen. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to introduce her. I'm very happy today to welcome Kathy Sudeikis, a longtime star of the travel industry and the current president of corporate relations for the vacation division at Acendas Travel. She has more than 4 decades in the industry, including years as the president of ASTA. She has more stories to tell than we'll be able to fit into today's session, even if we had triple the amount of time. So I do want to get to it. I want to say welcome, Kathy, and thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thanks, Dan. I'm excited to be here, and hi to all the friends I see joining. That's kind of fun. If you've heard the stories before, just laugh anyway.
I'm sure you have stories that a lot of people haven't heard either way. But yeah, I think we should get right to it. Today, we're going to be talking about how to become the go-to public relations expert in your local news area. I mean, Kathy, your career has certainly benefited from how you were able to make yourself a presence on both local and national news. And I think today we're going to concentrate on how advisors can become the go-to guest for segments on local TV and radio and how that can help them in their careers. Yeah, so we had a prep call earlier in the week. We sort of outlined, we have a lot to cover today. I know you have 8 points you want to get to. I'm going to do my best to keep it moving. But let's jump right into it, I think. What we spoke about on the other day is the first thing you wanted to talk about was understanding your local market, your local news market, and how that's important to sort of developing the kind of presence that you think advisors can benefit from.
Right, thanks, Dan. Well, the difference is, of course, that there's the national news and the breaking news stories that are covered by ABC, CBS, and NBC. But the chances that you're going to appear on one of those is pretty slim and none. So let's concentrate on the local news. And you need to understand that there's an ABC station, a CBS, an NBC, and also a Fox station in your own marketplace. And if there is a local newspaper, most of these same things will apply to a local newspaper, not to a newspaper. Columns and stuff are not the same as they were years ago.
Sorry,
so
Kathy.
What I'm thinking about is local.
Kathy, I think, can you just maybe pull the computer? Is it possible to get a little closer to the mic? I think a couple people are just having trouble hearing.
Yeah, is that better?
Yep, I think that's a bit better.
Okay, I can speak up too, sorry.
No worries, go ahead. I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, not a problem. So I think the way you find the contacts at those stations is really something that you need to be a little bit of a detective about. First of all, there's always the soft news in your local market, the one that's on at 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. before they switch to the national news. And knock on wood, you don't have to get in your car and bundle up to go to the station anymore because everyone's been doing things by Zoom and other online opportunities. But I used to get up in that hour of the morning and go to these stations. There's also the NBC station, the CBS station, as I said, and then all of them break to the national news at 7. They also have lunchtime news that's considered the soft news block. So that's either 11, 12, 1 o'clock kind of situation. And lots of different stations and lots of different marketplaces have like a 4 o'clock news before the big news starts at 5 or 6. So again, the local news is the soft news, is the interviews, is the kind of audience that is exactly what we're looking for, and not necessarily the heavy news unless there is sort of a breaking story. So I think that one of the other things that you have to understand is that the way to get the names of the news director who's going to be handling, and there's usually only a team of 4 or 5 that handle the soft news. The news director, you can find it in the credits. You can find the segment producer on the websites or online if you're just watching the show and you freeze it at the end, and then the host. So you're not going to be in touch with the hosts. That doesn't really work in the end. It never hurts if you cross paths with them somewhere socially or in the community to introduce yourself and maybe tell them if you're doing it, but that's completely an aside. If you're hunting out the way to appear on your local news, you'll need one of those names. And I just wanted to quickly explain the difference between TV and movies. In movies, you always hear, on the big screen TV movies, that the producer about the producer and the director, and they give Emmys and Oscars for both of those kinds of things. But The producer is the money person in a movie. And usually the names are not at all recognizable. And the big cheese is the director. So keep that straight, because you're not talking to the director when it comes to local news. So when it is a TV show, a talk show, any of those kinds of things, the person who does all the work and who's the worker bee is the producer. And usually a segment producer, unless it's one of these soft news shows where they produce the whole show. So that's your target audience, absolutely. And you need to pitch them stories, and that's a little bit about what I'm going to share with you now.
Yeah, I want to ask you that. We're still having a couple comments about the sound, so I'm going to ask someone on the back end too if they can maybe help us with that a little bit. But yeah, I wanted to ask. You spoke about sort of getting in touch with these people. I mean, do you have tips on once you find their names on reaching out? And what kind of stories you would want to tell them that you're able to contribute to?
Yeah, I really do. And it's sort of seasonal. I would say that you shouldn't do this more than 4 times a year, because you will be a pain in the butt if you do more than that. But if you consider seasonally, there are always what we call evergreen stories. And evergreen stories are the kinds of things that they can put in at any time, just when they're not sure what to fit, and they can go to you and have that pulled up really quickly. And an example of an evergreen story is travel in the off season. You know, are people going? Did you, more specifically, can you save money by traveling in the off season? Scheduling every year, and just right after Labor Day, I talk to them about making schedules. And because by Labor Day and the kids are back in school, you know when the teacher in service days are, so you can plan 5-day trips to Disney World without taking the kids in the summer or over a holiday. You can plan their Thanksgiving holidays, which you know, of course, is so bad on Wednesday and Sunday, as we all do. And you'll even know now in colleges, because everything is online, they can tell you when they finish school for their Christmas semester. And that's usually trickier than the day they go back. So, and I also pitch spring break right then. So my audience is usually a little bit senior in the local markets, and it will be in yours as well. But right after the school year starts, the moms are kind of staying home and relaxing. So that's a really good pitch for them right there. And also one is what to expect when you're traveling at the holidays. You know, patience is one of the things I always say, and be prepared and wait for lines and anticipate all those things, and boarding passes, the things any one of us would tell a client. Oh, and that's an important piece, Dan, I think that I shared with you. You can't think about how big the audience is, or that you will be scared to death to do this. The really key to success is to consider the producer and then the news anchor, who you probably will only meet when you're sitting next to them on the couch at the station, is just have a conversation with them, a conversation just like you would have with a client. And if you keep the one-on-one with a client in mind, it becomes much easier, and you can take a deep breath and not feel anxious about the size of the group that you're pitching to.
Yeah, one thing I do want to touch on, because you mentioned being anxious about an interview, and I think a lot of advisors will get anxious about even making that initial inquiry to try to get on the news. And we spoke about this the other day. I mean, why do local news people, why would they be interested in speaking to travel agents? I mean, why are travel agents a good resource for them to have when they're doing these kind of stories? I mean, you spoke about how they simply have a lot of hours to fill, and it's good content for them, and it's something their viewers want to see.
Absolutely. You have to put the shoe on their foot. Instead of you trying to pitch something to get the opportunity to be on the air, you're doing them a favor. You have to keep that in mind too. They have, 5 minutes at a time for 3 and 4 hours, 5 days a week. And you are offering them something good. Again, something evergreen, or something like COVID. I mean, this is a perfect time. Everyone has such pent-up travel interest, and people are just looking for ways around, and they've covered so much of what's happening in COVID that talking about things like, are people starting to travel? When will cruises come back? And you know, I've been saying regarding cruises that while lots of people are scared to cruise, another whole group of people are signing up to take Royal Caribbean's free cruises, like 100,000 people, you know, that kind of thing. And so those are eye openers, usually for the producer, and you have to capture their imagination. And then the news anchor that you're sitting alongside, usually in a comfortable couch situation, is a whole different dynamic, but it's kind of a fun one. You really are doing them a favor. You really are.
And so I also want to ask you, just because of your career, I want to give you a chance to talk about one of your first experiences with the media. I know you've had a long career, and I know you've done a lot of media, but I mean, I was wondering if you could tell us about one of your first experiences and what that was like, and what you were like going into it.
Right. If you do have the chance, lots of times they'll call and talk to you and do a pre-interview, for example. And one day I was sitting at my desk and I had a phone call, and I had those for radio stations a number of times as well, because I was active in ASTA and I was on the public relations committee at one point. And there are still terrific ways to connect with ASTA on asta.org. That you can tell them that you have a story to pitch, or you have clients that are doing something particular. But so I got this call and we chatted and chatted and chatted, and I sensed it was, you know, testing me out kind of. And towards the end of the conversation, I had just taken CBS down as the name and not really paid a lot of attention. And then at the end, I said, now, who am I talking to again? Oh, my dear, this is the CBS Morning News. We'll fly you to New York to talk with Bill Curtis and Diane Sawyer tomorrow morning. I was scared to death. So I was much more anxious about meeting the producer, because they held the hands to all these other things. So I was so anxious about how do you come in from the snow and what you're wearing and that kind of a thing for a face-to-face. But I also panicked because I said, oh dear, I am not Katie Couric. I am not Sparkle Plenty and Sprite and Teeny and all of those kinds of things. So I couldn't not eat from now till I got to you and have it make a difference. So I have to be candid with you. If you want the personality that you talk to on the phone and the information I I was able to share with you, then you know, I'm your girl. But if you're looking for Sparkle Plenty, you have to go to Plan B. So that was a little bit scary. And then when I got on the stage, Bill Curtis came over to ask me the questions that we had prearranged. And instead, just before the lights came up, he said, oh, I forgot my paper. I'll just ask you about visas in Africa and stuff like that. Yikes, that wasn't anything I wanted to be involved with either. So I quick handed him my piece of paper, and we were back on track talking about stuff that I anticipated that were much more open-ended rather than specific. Where do you look to find all that other information? We all know we can scramble with a client and improvise.
Yeah, and I think I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit either, but I think it's great to hear people even of your sort of stature is still being nervous when they're called by local news. I think that's a natural thing to have happen. So we do have a couple questions in the chat, and I know we have a lot to get to, including sort of what not to say on air, how to prepare, things like that. But we have a couple people talking about, again, contacting the local news stations. And I know you have built relationships with local news people over your career, but do you have any advice for people wondering, I mean, what the best way to contact the local news people is right now? I mean, is it to try to track down their phone number, try to track down their email address? Is it the cold call? I mean, do you have any advice?
I think it's a little of all of those kinds of things, but the most successful thing that you think you'll find is being a detective, getting the right name, calling and having the receptionist answer and say you're looking for their email address, that kind of thing. And then just like, you know, have I got news for you, or looking for travel back information on travel. It's the hottest thing happening. Everyone's wanting to go travel. I mean, that would be an absolutely current kind of thing that you could do. And in just eye catcher, you know, just not lots of white space, just like we say about brochures and all those kind of things. Introduce yourself, in just a half a paragraph, talk about things like, are people traveling? What about this immunity passport? Is that going to be necessary? Oh, and I wanted to remind you that the way I get these ideas for these evergreen stories, or even to pitch anything, is to go to one of the newsletters that we get over and over and over, and sometimes more than one. Certainly the TMR report, because they come up with great things. And just 2 days ago or so, and I put them all in a file that says TV interviews, so I know where to go back and find them if I need to. But there was a story that said people are 7% happier if they travel. And that was kind of a nice little hook. And so you could pitch that specifically. And if they're slow and if they're quiet, you know, it's a little tricky pitching all 4 outlets at the same time. But I think that it doesn't hurt to try and get a nibble from one of those people. And then, you know, wait for a call. I would only do it 4 times a year at the most. I would maybe even rotate them, but you don't want this making a huge crazy thing. This is beyond your social media. This is yet another kind of thing. And maybe your social media person can run interference for you, because whenever I get booked on something, our social media team takes it and puts it in Twitter and in Facebook and that kind of stuff. And so it's a big plug for the show, for the morning news, and the producers like that as well. And sometimes if they're good ones, he'll show them after the fact as well. So that's kind of fun. And if you do get a hit, I want you to be sure to not only save it and promote it, but put it on your website under a file called press. Because when people are on hold or waiting to talk to you or snooping, they're clicking on about you, contact you, all of those kind of things. And a press piece really brings it to people's attention, and they get more of a sense of your style and your relaxed. But you have to be relaxed. You have to be offering them a favor, all those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I will say, like, I'm in the travel trade news, but I mean, every news person has space they need to fill, and you making it easier is a gift almost. So that's a great tip. Going to ASTA, using their press resources is a great tip. Finding the email addresses and telephone numbers, and also, like you said, not being super pushy about it is a great strategy. So now I want to move on. I want to shift focus. Again, something we spoke about the other day was the appropriate information to share and maybe the inappropriate information to share. So you want to talk about that? I mean, when you're going to the news interview, when you're preparing, I mean, what kind of things do you make sure you bring along in your head or with your notes? And what kind of things are in your head that you're making sure aren't coming out of your mouth during the interview?
Well, there are a couple of things that I've learned over the years that I think can be really helpful. One of them, and this applies to the pitch and to the time you're on the air, you never, ever, ever, ever succeed by pitching your agency or pitching your name. You are pitching on behalf of the travel agency community. And please don't say we have a travel show coming up, or we have a cruise night coming up, or we're offering a trip to Oberammergau for this year. Fastest way to not get asked back. But trust me, they run your name, they run your agency, they'll run your website on their website. All of those kind of things come with the territory. They introduce you. They usually say the agency that we're with. As you get more comfortable, they say, yeah, Kathy's the person to call. Of course, I'm not there answering the phone all the time for those kind of things. So sometimes you never know what will hit, and the phone will ring like crazy before I even get to the station, from the station back to the office at 9 o'clock. And they'll say, why didn't you warn us that that people were gonna be calling? You know, when you talk about Super Bowl, last minute seats and things like that. The other thing you never ever wanna say is how bad business is or how terrible things have been. We all know that, that's a given. A smart consumer knows that as well. You have to talk about everything as being a challenge, an opportunity, those kinds of things, because these things can be self-predicting. I mean, they really can. And for years, nobody wanted to get in the travel business. And now the dearth of having employees that are smart and trained are really kind of hard to find, but all the travel schools are gone. So you don't want to be saying and listening, having the mother, there's no future in the travel business. I wouldn't hire anybody, blah, blah, blah. I can barely keep myself afloat. Any of those kinds of things that we all can commiserate with each other. But you wouldn't want someone's mom to hear that and then not pay for them to go to a travel school or even approach you for a travel agency business. And there's, we all know there's more to the travel industry when you're counseling kids who, or even second careers who want to do that. So you have to stay positive and you have to speak from the same page. I told you when we were having the pre-call that one morning, many years ago, I was in Washington, D.C., and I was brushing my teeth and kept the Today Show on in the background as company. And any of you who roomed with me will know that I do TV 24/7 just as company. And the catch with that is that I was in the bathroom, but I heard Peter Greenberg, the infamous Peter Greenberg, saying on the Today Show, so if they don't have a room for you, just cause a scene in the lobby. The manager will be right down and they'll find you a room, trust me. I was flabbergasted. I mean, I thought, never tell clients to cause a scene in the lobby, and so many more opportunities and what a travel agent can do for you if that's the reality, and how to make that play for it in everybody's. But just to be that rude about telling people that kind of advice is really pretty gruesome. And you just don't, I think the key to my success, Dan, quite honestly, is my audience is the other travel agents in the world who may have the radio on, may have morning TV on, may have the Today Show on. I pitch and speak to my client, the producer, that hanker, as if they were another travel agent. And I would never, never say anything that I wouldn't want to hear as a travel agent. I just think that if you keep that basic point in mind, you will go a lot further than if you try to use this as a promotional piece. The promotion comes sideways and always. But mentioning it up front or trying to sneak it in when you're talking to an anchor never works. And then eventually they will call you for Eastern Airlines going bankrupt or cruise lines back in the water, which will appear on the evening news. But again, you have to be speaking for the good of the industry, and we all win.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip. Speaking as a representative of the travel industry, as opposed to a representative of your agency, and the latter will just come along as when you're on TV and when the coverage gets broken. One thing I did want to circle back to when we mentioned story pitches, and something I saw when I was researching the kind of coverage you got was when the Kansas City Chiefs were in the Super Bowl last year, or sometime in the last couple of years. You got some coverage for helping sort of a story about how to get last minute travel to Miami to see the Chiefs, and I think that's another interesting angle. It's all about being creative as an advisor trying to pitch these news outlets.
Yeah, and I know, and every travel agent on the line knows that you can't get 2 Super Bowl tickets and you can't get in space if it's your hometown, that kind of thing. But there are avenues, and if your team's in the playoffs, you can pitch your newsletter to say, take the gamble. How much do you really care? Book something now, because the Monday morning after the last playoff is not going to be a time to find anything. And, you can help them go to hotels that are out of the city and explain to them that the hotels are just like Mardi Gras or the Kentucky Derby or anything. They require a 4-night minimum. And so you're not going to find a Hyatt or a Hilton or even a Notel Motel who's going to take you. But you can move from Tampa to, someplace that's within driving distance that day, Sarasota or someplace down the coast of Florida, and just drive back for the big game. And then, of course, the air ticket is another piece of the equation. Some agencies will take the gamble and maybe block some space if they do the clubs travel. But that's the same with the World Series. Knock on wood, our Royals have done that, and certainly the Kansas City Chiefs. So it's a little bit about being proactive. And then, of course, they'll all want to know it's the Wednesday before the game. How much will it really cost?
Yeah.
Now, if I blew it all and I really want to go, and you go to all those ads that you get online. that show you that the 3-day package where they've got the ticket and starts at about 4,000, and that's in the upper balcony. And if you want to, and that's per person, and just what it'll cost in a full fare air ticket, if you can even get that. But they like knowing that it's going to be $10,000 instead of 2,000, and it's a more fun story.
Yeah, I mean, I think big events are big opportunities for advisors because people, I mean, this year, 2020 was a bit of a different year, and I think that maybe the big event this year might be the Summer Olympics, which might not be super appropriate, you know, considering travel. But I mean, there's a World Cup in 2022, there's a Super Bowl, a World Series, championship games every year, and people are going to want to know how they can be in the stadium or in the arena, and I think those are great opportunities.
It's all about giving open-ended advice, because none of small agencies are going to have invested in tickets and the upfront and the requirements, nor are they going to buy hotel space in advance. So you've got to be able to answer it as the everyman, not as somebody who's really going to have access to those kind of things. You'll make yourself crazy if you think that. And again, it's way too much it needs to be a specialty agency who handles those kind of things and has the all of the secondhand sellers available to you, and the black market guys, and the team's tickets, and all of those kinds of things that you learn about if you end up in that situation. But you don't talk about that on the air. You'll end yourself nuts.
Yeah, I will say I saw your Kansas City Royals beat my team a few years ago in the World Series, the Mets. So I still have a bitter taste in my mouth, but I think we're going to move the conversation along. Yeah. So we have a few more points to get. We have about 25 minutes. Yeah, I mean, so the next thing we want to jump in about is tips for preparing for the interview. Do you have any advice on sources of correct information you would take in with you, whether it's in your head or in your notes, in with you into the interview to make sure you're speaking as an expert?
Yeah, that's a really, really good point, because you don't want to find yourself behind the 8 ball, especially if something's a little bit controversial. If it is a breaking news story and you get the call about an airline going bankrupt or any of those kinds of things, you don't want to speculate. You don't want to, you could give them information about what's happening in your agency in terms of reprotecting people and how valuable the service of a travel agent is to be there for their clients through thick and thin and good and bad. But if you've got to give hard facts, you can go to the ASTA.org site again. They often write white papers very quickly. They write press releases. You can forward that to the station manager or to the new producer, or you can make a copy for yourself and just use that as the basis of your thing. The other thing is really those newsletters. I thought of another really good that I get almost every year, 2 of them. One is what would the 12 days of Christmas cost today to get, you know, whatever all those crazy things are. And it's usually about $25,000. But somebody will have written that in the press, and you can take that over and get that number without trying to figure it out yourself. And I forget what the other one is, but but those kinds of things are just open-ended and are real easy.
Yeah, and I think there's going to be a ton of opportunities for advisors in the next year to do this and to get some coverage because, you know, the pent-up demand for travel is going to cause a lot of people to want to ask those same questions. So I guess my next point, I mean, when you're personally preparing for one of these interviews, do you bring in a set of talking points or a set of notes? You've obviously done it a lot at this point, but how much do you prepare when you're going in to do one of these interviews?
You know, I know that a lot of people are panicky and do a lot of preparation and start to worry about that kind of thing and what could they ask. Yeah. You know, what could they ask is the same thing what a client could ask. And you tap dance around what an appropriate answer is. But I carry at least 3, but no more than that, talking points with me that I carry on an index card and just set on the table in front of me, or I've been known to write them on my hand. And there's certainly the leading questions that you give the producer when they say, what would you like to talk about? And then they always say, is there anything we didn't cover that you'd like to talk about? And I usually say a travel agent's, you know, your best friend in this day and age. It's somebody that's in your back pocket who can give you an unbiased opinion and can be there when things go wrong, and who are you going to call kind of thing.
Yeah.
And certainly not the Travelocity gnome anymore. That doesn't work in the end. Can't reach those people, but you can reach a local travel agent.
So how long is the typical segment then? How long are you really there for, and how long are you on TV for at the finished product?
2 minutes, 3
Yeah.
minutes, 5 minutes would be an exception. If we start to gossip, it can be 7 minutes, but it's really just 2 or 3 minutes. And you watch if it's a slow news day. Or one of the other tips that I give people, or I'm recommending, is that you turn on the morning show when you get up in the morning, and so you can see what the anchor's wearing. If they're wearing a plaid thing, maybe you don't want to wear a striped blouse. You don't want to wear black. You want to wear red or any other primary color, the royal blues. I wear oranges in the winter. I try to wear pink and green in the dead of winter, because you want to keep people smiling. And also, I've used the background that you can use on Zoom of being at the Caribbean, in the beach, and the trees blowing in the wind, the palm trees. They love those kinds of things. They also love something called B-roll. And B-roll is the ancillary things that they cover. Like sometimes they open the story with a beach scene or a cruise scene and things like that. You can get that for them real easily online yourself, or the people who are in the control room can get that for you. Sometimes they'll want some brochures that you either drop off, or now everything can go online, so you can share those kind of things with them. And it really makes a difference. Also, if they come to your office to shoot, which is something from one of the assignment directors, and because there's something going on, hurricane in Cancun or something, they'll want to shoot the front door. They'll maybe want to shoot your brochure racks. They will want to maybe shoot some of the other agents in your office that have that they're over their shoulder at the screen. You have to be sure every agent in your office is cool with that, because I have had people say, don't want to do that. Easy to eliminate them when you're walking around, but you wouldn't want to do it otherwise. They'll come over your shoulder, and you have to, and with you with the glasses on, working on the computer, or those kinds of things. So you do have to pre-plan. And I shared another thing with you that is just completely off the wall, but very, very important.
Mm-hmm.
You go to all the work of making this pitch, whether you're the boss in an agency, the social media person, or the person who just has the moxie to go ahead and do this, because lots of us in the travel agency business have been theater majors and things like that. So we have some talent. But if you whoever you are, the person that does it, you need to have a backup in the office. Somebody that will take the business if you're on vacation, if you're not there yet early in the morning, because they're calling right at the crack of 9 o'clock because of the story and they want to get it on the new news or even the 4 or 5 news, then you have to have somebody, because in more than one occasion over my years in the business, they've called to ask for me at the front desk of the office. They'll say she's not there. And they always are generous to say, is there anybody else we could talk to? And, the receptionist or someone will yell, anybody want to talk to the media? And everybody goes, not me, not me, not me. The worst thing that could happen, you as a source go out of their Rolodex and down to the bottom. You have to have somebody who'll be there as a backup for you, even if it's your best friend at another agency who can handle it. But you could lose the business if they're better than you are. That's why you wouldn't lose it if it was your agency, but they're always looking for somebody new to break things up. But also there is terrific value in them going back to their travel agent, because travel's on our mind again. Let's go check in with Kathy and see what's new. So it's a crazy composure or composite of all of those kinds of things. And I really invite you to have a backup, because it'll just bite you in the fanny if you don't.
Yeah, and I think again, someone said in the chat, and I think it's great words that backups are the key to any business, and I think that's very important. I wanna get to some questions from the chat a little later. So if anyone has a question, please go ahead and drop it. We'll have a few minutes at the end to sort of get to them. But I wanted to ask you, Kathy, about sort of when you're on TV, do you have any tips about sort of just what you should do when you're in that live shot or the recorded shot? Do you have any tips about looking at the camera or talking to the host, or even what to eat or drink prior in that day to make sure that you sound the best you can and you look the best you can look?
Thanks for asking that, because we did sort of pass over it. I do have a bunch of tips about that. If you're going on the radio or even on TV and it's one of these early morning shows, even if you're doing it from your kitchen or office, you need to have vocalized or just read the alphabet or counted to 10, because you probably haven't spoken to anyone else in your house. You haven't woken your spouse up, or they're not paying attention when you're up at 5 a.m. to do this. And I have on more than one occasion opened my mouth and gotten a squeak out of it by mistake. So I'm now always counting to 10 at least, or talking to myself in the car and things like that. You also need to be sure you have the phone number or the phone number of the contact that's going to be working at the station at that hour of the morning. Trust me, there is nobody but you in the dark, and and this maybe a cameraman, and sometimes they're remote nowadays, maybe somebody in the control room and the anchor. So if you get to the front door and there's been a middleman between you and who's making this pitch, you may not have the inside phone number, and there's a doorbell to ring and all of those kind of things, which are really scary if you know you're going on in 12 minutes and you're still outside the building. That can be scary. Also, being on time is more than necessary, because everything is to the minute, and they can tell you to the minute what time you're going to be on. When you're on the set, I did have the pleasure of going to the great opportunity actually to go to some media training, and they told us a couple of things. One of them is to sit on the back of your coat so it doesn't bunch up in the back, and to always sit forward on the edge of the chair, not comfortably back in the couch, in the chair with your fanny right to the back. If you look at yourself in those two positions, you will find how different it looks and how much more professional it looks. And of course, there's no leg crossing, and there's the Princess Di ankle cross and that kind of thing that are appropriate. Certainly anything goes in terms of clothes anymore. People wear jeans on the show, on those morning news all the time. And it's about the colorful tops, and sometimes the anchor will put on heels. That's about their commitment to dressing up in this day and age. One of the other things is that when you go on the air, you're of course nervous and you're of course anxious, and I'm a fast talker anyway. But if someone says to you, "So Kathy, how are you this morning?" "I'm just fine. I'm just absolutely great," and you just burst out with all of that thing. If you can, before you go on the air, take your palms and push really, really, really tight, like the old lady exercises, but push tight. It'll take the adrenaline rush off, and you'll be able to answer more calmly. It's a stupid little thing, but I found that it really, really works, because I still get very, very nervous. And the last thing is, and it's something I try to do, but you can't do it enough, smile like a loon. Smile. The more you smile, the better it will be. The more you smile, the more natural it will look. It doesn't pay to try and be too concentrated on things. Just smile more than you ever would have, and you will look and feel that much better about the presentation when you play it back. My house, they don't even tape it anymore. They're all so blasé. It's pretty bad. I get to see it when my office does it sometimes.
Again, I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit, but I do. I want everyone to make sure that those points sort of stay in their head too. Is to make a good impression, and I guess don't be too nervous. Just be just be yourself. And I think there's so many great advisors on this call and in the industry that the personalities coming through is the best thing that can happen. So a few
Again,
questions.
just like you're talking to a client and
Yeah.
just the one-on-one. And that's what we all are proud of us about ourselves, the way we come up with answers. And, one of the other things I've learned that after this many years in the business, why don't I take myself for sure? Don't hesitate about it mentioning a hotel name. I've been there, I've done that. If I like something, it's fine to mention it, it really is. And again, you're just answering the way you would answer a client.
Yeah, and I will say, I mean, local news is still very powerful in communities around the country, around North America. And local news is still a great way to get clients. We have a few people jumping into the chat talking about their successes on shows, and a few people asking about good angles to pitch right now, which I think we'll get to at the end of this call. We have about 10 or so minutes left. But I want to just let you have the opportunity to talk about how your exposure or your participation in local news, in national news, has benefited your career. If there's any particular memories you have that you want to share, or why has being sort of a voice in the local media, how has that sort of helped you move along?
Oh, it absolutely helps the business. I mean, in my position as I'm working right now, I am sort of the face of the agency, and that is a big help to the agency. People in grocery stores will say hello. People will call and say, I saw you on TV last week, and I'll say, well, let me give you to a specialist in our office who handles Disney or those kinds of things. It comes up almost every day where someone refers back to it. It's interesting because you can tell of your friends who watches what station, because in a social situation of which we have been so devoid this last year, but they'll say, oh, I saw you on Channel 4. Oh, I saw you on Channel 5. And, I always have to say how gracious, how lucky I am to be there for them, because they're really, really good to me. They are very generous, and they give me the opportunity to represent the travel community in a lot of ways. And it does circle all the way around and back to our agency, Acendas. So it doesn't hurt. I was thinking of the one time that I think I told you this, that the I was on CBS Morning News, and I ended up doing some trips for CBS 60 Minutes executives, backroom executives, producers, and that kind of thing. The head of censorship called and wanted to go to Costa Rica, and at that time, you couldn't wear a beard or be over 70 to rent a car in Costa Rica. Well, I'd never met this person, so I had to have the awkward situation of bringing that up. And one of the producers that I worked with and had a wonderful time with, now you don't do their business travel necessarily, you do their corporate or their vacation travel and that kind of thing. But it's important that nobody knows who the producer is. So you have to call the hotel and call ahead and say, I'm dealing with this producer and they're from 60 Minutes, and it may not be talent you recognize, but you don't want to screw this up because 60 Minutes is a big thing. So anyway, she was doing a story about Yul Brynner that Mike Wallace had done about the smoking, and his last few interviews were before he died of throat cancer and that kind of lung cancer. And she was in the company manager's office of the Broadway show that he had been doing forever, The King and I, and she was fighting with the local travel agent that she was dealing with. And the producer, who I had never met, said to the company manager, you're going to think I'm crazy, but I have this travel agent in Chicago or in Kansas City that I trust. And so she ended up calling me. I ended up doing that business. I did The King and I on tour 2 different times. I did it when Nureyev, the company manager, became the ally in those situations. And the company ally, again, you only had to impress one person, which was the company manager, and on a reference from the CBS producer that I had, again, never touched, never set eyes on. And so she'd say, I'll work with the agency that's assigned by the Broadway management company, but if they make a mistake, I'm using my own travel agent or I'm walking. So I ended up with Anthony Quinn and Zorba the Greek and Anthony Newley and things. Oh my gosh, Andrew Lloyd Webber and Sarah Brightman. Some of those people are still my clients to this day. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah, I don't. You certainly. When we spoke the other day, and the amount of stories you could tell, it was just dumbfounding how impressive your career has been, and a lot of that is due to sort of how you've been able to sort of leverage your exposure, and I think a lot of advisors can learn something about that. So I want to ask one last question. I know a lot of advisors haven't been on TV. I know there's some in the chat who have been on TV or radio, but I would say the majority haven't. If you were one of those, Kathy, and you were sitting down today and making a plan as one of your resolutions to reach out to news people, what would you pitch today as a new entrant into the sort of the media landscape? Is there a story you would look to that would you think would be super enticing, or is there a topic you would sort of send to these news people to give you the best chance you can to get on TV for the first time?
Really good question, Dan, and sort of a moving target still. I mean, I think people are interested to see this travel coming back, what's on the horizon, where could you go right now? I talk about the travel bubbles that the all-inclusives have been able to create that have been successful, just the way the NBA created the travel bubble at Disney and had people tested, employees and guests. I think I would talk about, is cruising going to come back? But we don't really know when it's coming back, so that may be something that's still weeks off to pitch. I would talk about any of these things that talk about the psychology of travel. American Express had a whole set of press releases that they put out a couple of years ago about how not taking your vacation days really was a terrible impact on you physically and mentally and psychologically. And just that kind of an open-ended pitch now, rather than, Cancun has special hotel rates. But you can say that open-ended, there are deals like crazy. I am being exposed to them every day. And I can read through the fine print, and I can tell you what's good or too good to be true, and make that decision for you. And trust me, I am not going to do it in my best interest, because it's more important for me that you come back to me and send your friends to me than it is for me to make an increased commission. And sometimes I've even gone as far as to, like on a business thing, to say, look, if it's a $2,000 trip and I make $200, do you think I'm really going to charge you $3,000 or sell you the most expensive thing to make an extra $100? It just isn't a business decision that makes sense. And when we're accused of doing that and scamming people or only selling the highest person that we have relationships with, it doesn't work economically. And I think you can make a point with that. That's one of those open-ended, but I think that's not the time for right now.
Yeah, I think the deal's too good to be true is a very enticing story for news people, and we are going to get a lot of positive news stories about the travel industry in the coming months. I know it seems bleak for a lot of people right now, but we're going to get the good news about cruising at a certain point in 2021, and local news people are going to want to talk about that, and there's no better person to talk about that than travel advisors. If anyone else has any ideas of what you would pitch right now, you can drop them in the chat, and we can sort of collaborate with each other. We have about 250 people on the call right now. And while we do that, I want to give you the opportunity to sort of wrap up. If there's anything else you want to add, if there's anything else you think we missed. And I also want to say thank you so much for lending us your time today.
Oh, well, thank you. It's really been fun. No, it's a passion that I love. And especially as I have moved through the travel industry, I've had this opportunity, and, I'm geographically desirable when it comes to the national news because I'm in Kansas and I can put a sentence together, and that usually intrigues producers and editors that it's not one of the talking heads from New York City or Chicago and wearing a suit and a tie and that kind of thing. So, I mean, you do have lots of pluses in your favor. and that you shouldn't shy away from those. And again, it's not as hard as it sounds, only because you're doing them a favor. And that's a hard way to pitch it for yourself and to get it right in your mind. But it's a client, and you're pitching them something that's open-ended for the good of the industry, and it will come back and honor you tenfold.
Well, thank you so much again. I've been very lucky to have a bunch of great advisors on these calls, and you're just added to that list. And I just want to say thank you so much for the hour today. For everyone on the call, I hope to see you guys back here in 2 weeks. We have a very exciting session planned. And for everybody else, continue to have a very happy new year. And I hope 2021 is going the best it can go for everybody.